So I thought I'd do a video on my XJR6 today, and in particular the modifications the car has. So what I'll do, run through the mods, and then we'll look at how that's changed the car, for better or worse. But first, let's quickly recap on the story so far, because some of you may recognise this car from elsewhere on YouTube. So basically, I've had the car for about 4 or 5 years now. What I really wanted was a manual one, of course. The chances of finding one are really quite slim. But nevertheless, I was looking for one. This particular car was an automatic, but it popped up whilst I was looking for a manual, and obviously it ticked all the right boxes, but it had the wrong gearbox, and I just kept staring at this thing, and it was for sale for a long time and at a really low price. And I picked up the phone and I spoke to the garage where it was for sale. It was for sale at a Jaguar specialist. I could see in the pictures that it had lack appeal on the bonnet and the roof, which I understand can put people off. But I guess the other thing, which is why they mentioned to me on the phone why nobody had bought it, was the diff was really noisy. But I thought, well, if all it needs is a little bit of paint and a new diff, why not take a punt on it? So that's kind of what I did. I mean, the car was up for 2,800, and that was cheap even back then. So I did a deal at 2,500. It was a long way away from me, the car, so I didn't even bother going to look at it. I just bought it sight unseen and had it delivered to me. And luckily for me, the seller was really honest with the car, so there was no surprises for me, which is always good. So I did just literally had the bonnet and roof resprayed, and I sourced a good used diff and had that fitted. So when you put a new diff in one of these, you've got to drop the rear subframe. So whilst you're there, you might as well do a bunch of other stuff. So when the subframe was dropped, I had the rear suspension renewed and polybushed up, and I put a refurbished subframe in there as well, because they do like to rust on the rear subframe, these. So at that point, I had a really good low owners, low miles XJR6. It's kind of what I always really wanted, apart from it was an automatic. So, well, luckily for me, I had from my previous Jag, which was a 4-litre normally aspirated manual, I had all the parts from that, so I basically had a full manual conversion kit. So I grabbed all those parts and I had that all sort of fitted up, and then I had essentially a really good example of an XJ6 that is now converted to manual. So yeah, it's quite chuffed at that point. I got in touch with James Martin of JM on Cars, a car YouTuber, and I said, look, I've got this really interesting car, it's a rare thing being a manual XJR6. I said, look, it's not a genuine one, it's a conversion, but you're not going to find a genuine one, so do you want to feature it on your channel? And he said yes. And that's the video that's on his channel. So that was kind of where the car was at that point. So it was a reasonable example of the breed, as it were. Since that video, it's had work done to the engine, the gearbox, suspension, brakes. I've been through the whole car basically, just to sharpen it up a tad. So what we're going to do now is have a quick look at what I've done since then, and we'll look at the impact that's had. Okay, so we'll start off in the engine bay. The standard airbox has been replaced with a Blitz kit made for an R33 Skyline. It's a really high quality dry stainless steel filter with a built-in heat shield there, imported from Japan. But obviously it does look a little bit out of place in this engine bay, so I do just This is actually the factory cover. I do just sort of cover it up. Next up is the intercooler pump. So it's this one here. It's just much bigger than the standard unit. This is like a Bosch style pump that came on sort of V8 supercharged cars. The standard Hella pumps are a bit weak, and obviously after 20 plus years they wouldn't be working too well anyway. Then the larger crank pulley, which basically spins the supercharger up 10% faster. The supercharger itself, that's this little beastie here, the Eaton M90, that has been ported and polished. Now, as part of that process, I've removed these bits of metal that partially block the outlet port, as Eaton did themselves in their later superchargers. But you can just kind of get rid of those. They're little recesses for the bolts. Well, these ones here. So you can get rid of those kind of thumb-sized pieces of metal and cut the bolts down, and then you've kind of cleared the outlet port. I then sent the rotor pack off to a company in the States called Magnum Powers, where they fitted a new bearing plate with integrated trapped air port, and they coated the rotors as well for finer tolerances. All of those things aid the M90 in being as efficient as possible, and that's important because these are not known for being very efficient at all, particularly at the higher speeds. So if you're spinning them up a bit quicker, it just makes sense to make them a little bit more efficient as well. And it's then, it's been rebuilt as well. Rebuilt snout, new needle bearings in the back, and it's gone back together with a ZZ Performance coupler, again imported from America. We've obviously got the rather lovely looking tubular manifolds there. Those were built to a set of specs developed on a dyno specifically for this engine, so they are the best you can get. Just behind that, a bit further back, I've got all metallic sports cats, 200 cell cats, which then go into 2 high flow intermediate silencers and then 2 high flow back boxes. The manifolds, the cats and the intermediate silencers are all Hayward and Scott, and the back boxes are XJR6 engineering, all stainless steel. The car also does have a remapped ECU, which has an aggressive ignition map on as well. Yeah, once I'd done those engine mods, and I was happy with the performance of the car, how it felt, I did put it on a rolling road, and the result of that is as follows. Note the torque curve is basically vertical, straight up to 397 pounds-foot. That's what makes this car really shift. The horsepower figure 355, I mean the factory figure's 325, so that doesn't seem that great, but I was talking to people that have prepped these cars for racing, and they said they've never seen a standard XJR6 produce more than 300 horsepower on a dyno due to heat soak. And I can believe that. The chap that ran the rolling road did say my car's probably closer to 370, but I'll never know. I mean, you know, regardless of all that, 355 I'm pretty happy with, considering the car is 27 years old and it's got 101,000 miles on the clock, so I'm pretty chuffed with that. Now, for the gearbox, when James had the car in the JM video, the car had the factory dual mass flywheel. That is a ludicrously heavy thing, it really is. And what that meant was the car was, although it was a lot more responsive than an auto, it was still slow to build revs. The other problem was the pressure plate. So because I'd taken the manual conversion kit from a normally aspirated car, the pressure plate wasn't the uprated version that you got in the supercharged cars. So basically everything's the same if you get an XJ6 manual, apart from the pressure plate, and that's the the one part that I didn't have to make this sort of fully, you know, as it would have been from the factory if it was manual. So what that means is, whilst you can drive the car around normally, you know, it's not going to cause you any problems, you won't be able to ever do a full bore standing start. You know, there's a reason why the XJR one is uprated, and incidentally it's the same setup as used on the DB7 i6 manual as well. So a couple of issues there. So heavy flywheel, weak pressure plate, you know, it wasn't ideal. So to remedy both of those things, Swallows Racing, who are a Jaguar specialist, do a conversion kit, a single mass flywheel conversion kit, which is basically you take a flywheel, single mass flywheel from the 3.6 XJS manual, which is already lighter and smaller. They then lighten it further and obviously rebalance it, and then they fit it up to the car with a Helix competition clutch kit, which has obviously got a beefed up pressure plate and a paddle clutch. Swallows run a racing version of one of these that's got, I'm pretty sure, over 500 horsepower and 700 newton meters of torque. I think in newton meters this makes about 540, something like that. So, you know, that car is like well track proven. It's done a number of seasons, so, and you know, the gearbox hasn't broken, so that obviously gave me the confidence there. So I went and fitted that. So that now means that it revs just so freely now. The revs go straight up, which is really good. It's good for acceleration. And with the clutch kit and all that stuff in there now, I can do full bore standing starts, or at least attempt to, without destroying the clutch. Now I say attempt to because getting this car off the line quickly isn't easy. I think maybe a better driver could do a better job than me, but you know, 0 to 60 now with the mods and everything that's been done to the gearbox is around the 5-second mark. It can do under 5 seconds, but at any rate, you know, I've tried to anyway for this video, and I'll put that clip in now. Okay, now so for the brakes, these cars come with single piston floating calipers all round, which is exactly the same setup as the normally aspirated cars have, and to be honest, that is far from ideal for a car with, you know, this much power, this much torque, but 1875 kilo curb weight. So it was never really going to be good enough, and it was certainly the case that, you know, before, if I was to go for a spirited drive anywhere, you would immediately warp the discs, and you know, you'd get through a lot of brakes, put it that way. So what I've gone for is a big brake kit, but one designed to work with the 17-inch wheels on this car, and that's because I think, you know, these wheels, I'm a big fan of them anyway, but I mean they were only ever fitted to this car. So 94 to 97 XJR, you won't find these wheels on anything else as standard, so they are an integral part of the car for me. So I wanted to keep them. So the brakes I've got are 10% bigger at the front, so about 330mm, but they're a 2-piece disc, and I've got 6 piston calipers at the front, 4 piston at the rear. The discs at the rear are exactly the same size, well, the same discs, but obviously, yeah, four pistons at the back, 6 pistons on the front. You've just got a lot more pistons doing that, you know, providing that clamping force. Front discs are bigger, as I said, so it makes a big difference. They survived a track day as well, so, you know, going pounding around Donington all day, and that was what, September last year. I'm still on the same brakes now, and they're absolutely fine. It would not have been able to do that at all with the standard brakes that this came with. On to steering and suspension then. So for the steering, not much has changed, but with these cars, even from the factory, the steering was always a little bit woolly, a little bit vague initially, and what that actually is, that is just play between the rack mounts and the body. But you can shim that out, so you put these little shims in, removes all of that play, which I've done on this, and that has sharpened things up quite considerably. Now, suspension wise, the core of the suspension, so the springs and dampers, I decided I didn't actually want to mess with that. So a lot of people lower these. There's a couple of different lowering kits you can get, and I get that they do look good when they're lowered, but you know, one of the things that Jags are really known for is the ride, and you don't really get to keep that beautiful ride by lowering these or stiffening them up too much and stuff like that. So what I've done is I've taken this standard XJR springs and dampers, and just renewed everything basically. So I've got new springs, new dampers all round, but they are OEM, or the OEM, the factory spec ones are the green Bilstein dampers, just gone with the regular springs. So obviously what that does, it keeps the stock ride height, and it just keeps this beautiful kind of Jaguar sort of magic carpet ride. It's not as soft and wallowy as regular XJs, because it is dropped a bit from standard from the factory, but I think it's a pretty good compromise as is, so I didn't want to change that. That's what I've done there. All the bushes on the car are poly, and there are a couple of different manufacturers, because you can't get like a Powerflex kit that does the whole car. There are bits missing, so I've got Powerflex and Superflex bushes. Now, what I'd say about the poly bushes, the first 6 months or so I had them, I thought they were amazing, absolutely brilliant. I was recommending them to everyone, I thought they were the best thing in the world. And then of course after kind of 6-9 months, you do get the classic poly bush creaks going on, which, you know, low speed maneuvering and stuff like that, it can get a bit annoying, especially knowing that you've renewed your whole suspension, everything's brand new, everything's tight as a drum, but it creaks. It is a bit annoying. So now I'm kind of 50-50 on the poly bush thing. Yes, they feel amazing, you know, the car feels really planted, and you know, but yeah, a bit creaky. But apart from that, so it's got, the car from standard does have a tiny rear anti-roll bar. I mean, it's really thin, so that's been uprated. It's got a much thicker one on there now. and it's got rose jointed drop links there as well. The front anti-roll bar is standard, albeit poly bushed up with the D bushes, and the drop links are double rose jointed, but it is good. I mean, you can chuck this into a corner and it kind of stays, I wouldn't say flat, but it does stay remarkably stable through the corners, and that is in part due to those rose joints. But anyway, what's the net result of all that? Well, I have taken this car on track, and I did that to properly stress test everything and find out what the car was like at the limit. I could do that safe in the knowledge that mechanically this car wants for nothing, partly because it's so well maintained, and partly because they are just bulletproof. I mean, I'll put the link to the track day video in the description, but you know, if you skip to about halfway through that video, you'll see a professional racing driver take this round Donington, which was quite the passenger ride for me. And also at the end of the video, there's me running out of talent and spinning it off in the wet and stuff. But from that experience, I learned it's actually pretty good on track in the right hands. It still obviously has some dynamic shortcomings, so it's very front end heavy, so it can understeer on the way into a corner, and it can oversteer on the way out. But as long as you set your steering on the way into the corner to which loads the suspension up and settles the car, and that you're very gentle when transitioning from braking to the accelerator, it's really quite good. And then meanwhile, back on the road, it's a comfy Grand Tourer. It's the sort of car you can go from one end of the country to the other, and neither you or the car will be broken at the end of it. So to sum up then, what we have is, it's a proper Jag. I mean, even non-car people see this and they know what it is. But by converting these to manual, or even starting off with the factory manual, you're just unlocking everything that brilliant engine has to offer. And just by giving it just a bit more power, making it handle a little bit better, making it stop properly, you end up with something like this, which is like a retro 90s classic, but with modern performance. And the track day, I mean, that was almost a year ago now. The only thing the car needed after that was a wheel bearing, and the car's been pretty much in daily use ever since. Apart from that, it's obviously car's had a service since then. It's just a normal annual service, and that's it. It's not fair to say that these cars are underrated, because when they came out, everyone raved about them, including like Jeremy Clarkson. He had one, he loved it, but now they are starting to disappear a little bit. I think they're in danger of being forgotten in a way that things like BMW M cars just aren't. They'll always be there, whereas these are starting to fade away a little bit. And I think that's a great shame, because they're a hell of a lot of fun and they're really usable. Really usable. And the thing is, like I say, even as standard, they're good fun. But with a few tweaks, they're pretty hard to beat. But anyways, that's my XJR6. I mean, obviously I'll say it's brilliant, it's mine. But I really do, honestly, I really do really highly rate these cars. So if you've enjoyed that video, don't forget to drop a like, because that will tell me that you might want to see some more content with the car. And because I've really enjoyed the process of making this, any excuse to get out in the car, do some filming with it, it's fine by me. So yeah, if you you do like this car and you want to see more, drop a like and maybe a comment or two if you want to know any more. But apart from that, thank you for watching.